is not how they spend that money for operations. It's whether they spend it on programs to support people, things like food and medicine, so people start to say ISIS isn't just a terror group that kind of looks better than Nouri al-Maliki. It's a group that's delivering governance. That's the story in the next few months.
Iraq loses control of a major oil refinery. Israel's voice is getting louder over battles in the Middle East. And now there's talk the Obama administration is considering what America has been doing in Yemen as a possible model for solutions. Pleasure to welcome back to MidPoint, senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research and one who has been on the ground in many a military matter. New York Times bestselling author and retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. Lieutenant Colonel, thanks for being with us again today.
Ed, good to be on. Thank you for having me.
Let's start exactly with what is happening right now. The president of Iraq's autonomous Kurdish regions says today, in speaking to Secretary of State John Kerry, that we are facing a new reality and a new Iraq. I would say that that probably is understating it, correct?
That is, and let's be very clear here. That was a complete rebuke of Kerry's message, which is essentially let's maintain the current, that's a loose current boundaries of Iraq, which would include the Kurds staying within the larger Iraq Republic. This is a stunning, stinging rebuke, by the way. So the bottom line is this, Ed. The Kurds have been able to sustain themselves. They've been able to put together a well-organized, semi-autonomous state. It's functioning. They're the only ones who actually have a functioning military at this point. And I think we'd be well served, to be totally blunt, to actually work with them, since they're the only ones that seem to have a plan in the region. I'm not saying we should side with them completely. I'm just saying that if we really start defining our national security interest to look at securing the oil fields for the purposes of allowing the Iraqi people, like the Kurds, to have access to it, we're much better off siding with the Kurds than we are with some other organization within the region.
Lieutenant Colonel, now, what you just said, a stinging rebuke of the American policy here. Again, right. This would seem, if we look at this just from the first moment, that the American policymakers and the government was not prepared to hear this from the Kurds. It comes down to a lot of people that we weren't prepared for ISIS in the first place. We didn't really know they were coming, or we weren't well prepared. Should we not have been better prepared to deal with the Kurds and know immediately that they were going to take some sort of action and they were going to use the vernacular, get in our face over what's happening there?
Let me hit that in two pieces. First, Ed, we did see this coming. The intelligence community did. The policymakers chose to look the other way. So many intelligence failures over my career have not been intelligence failures, have been failure of policy. 9/11 was a failure of policy. The intelligence was all there. Same thing here. I've been told by my friends on the inside that we knew as early as January that ISIS was the Iraqi Republic. So we chose, politicians chose to do nothing about the intelligence. With that said, now this political narrative which is coming out is the same thing. President Obama did an interview over, I think it was Friday or Saturday, where he talked about ISIS is no big deal. We can't play whack-a-mole. Ed, ISIS is no quote-unquote whack-a-mole type terrorist organization. They're well-funded. They're well-armed. There's evidence the Saudis are supporting ISIS. And so this is not a simple, just a rebel group gaining ground temporarily. They are intent on taking and sustaining themselves through the physical occupation of territory. And so this is where, again, we have to look at what is in our interest, both as the Americans, for our interest in the region, and what is in interest for our allies. The Kurds, for better or worse, have been a very strong ally, even when we turned our back on them in '92 after the first Gulf War. So I think we have to first off define what is our policy interest. The White House has not done that yet, and then act on that policy interest, which, again, we're nowhere close to being able to do that.
Is it possible that while the Americans deal with al-Maliki and decide whether or not he can create a new government, should be in, should be out, that in many ways the Kurds, which we haven't really talked about a lot, might be the ones who will hold, if you will, the ace in the hole in all these negotiations?
I think your assessment is completely correct. Maliki has had ample opportunity, Ed, to form a quote-unquote inclusive government. That choice was made as soon as we left. He started essentially Sunniizing, if I can use that word. He took all the Sunnis who would help he took all the Sunnis out of those positions of authority within his government, which then alienated the entire population, creating conditions for ISIS, which is a Sunni-type terrorist organization, to be successful. So I think his day is past. With that said, I think we now have to go to our allies in the region for help. Egypt, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia are all Sunni led governments. I think we need to go to them to help put down the ISIS threat. ISIS will come after them as soon as they're done with Iraq. Don't get me. I have no doubt, any doubt on that. And then we have to deal with the Iranians separately because of the nuclear issue. So I think we have to play this smart. We have to look at the individual components. And I think, to be blunt, we have to give up any idea that we're going to come out of the other end of this with a unified Iraq in the form it was in 2011 when we left.
Let's be even more blunt here when we talk about the Iraqi military right now. They are on the run. They are on the run from the oil refinery. They are dropping their weapons. They are dropping American-made goods. And ISIS is picking them all up and using them right now. A report coming out of Iraq today says those who are signing up to volunteer receive a paltry week or less of training. And when combined with sycophantic generals and a low morale, the Iraqi army cannot stand up to the more experienced and more brutal ISIS insurgents. Have we not been saying this now for some time, that this is a military that, while they may be holding on to Baghdad and they may be centralized at this moment, that they simply do not possess enough to be able to create any sort of force to actually challenge ISIS?
The leadership of the Iraqi military was not seasoned. This is why they're different than, say, Pakistan or Egypt. We have worked with the Pakistani and Egyptian militaries for years. They have a tradition of military standards. The Iraq military never had time to mature. And this is one of the reasons that, while I and others were against the original Iraq invasion, once you're in there, it's your obligation to actually try to do what you can to help put that country on a favorable path. We needed more time to season that military. We needed more time for that government to take root and become a real centrist republic. We did neither when we left. And as you said, Ed, we left. We didn't pay any attention to this for the past 3 years. And what we're seeing now is the end result of us just not caring about what happens there. And the end result is the chaos we're now seeing.
Backing up in a New York Times poll right now, 58% of Americans disapprove of the way Mr. Obama is handling foreign policy. Americans back some of his approaches to the crisis in Iraq, but they show an increasing lack of faith in the president and his leadership. Lieutenant Colonel, all right, now, you want to get back some of that faith, if you will, then, from the American people. As we look at these numbers and just see how high they are getting against the president now, here's that simple question once again, which people of your knowledge will know. What should we do right now?
Two things. First, we've already seen that although gas prices should be falling for us right now, they're going up. It's attributable directly to the chaos in the Middle East. This is where I disagree with the president's approach to just letting them sort it out. Yeah, we should. I'm not saying we should put boots on the ground, but this is where, Ed, we have to define what our interests are for the American people and for our allies. So the first thing the president has to do is be a leader. Say, we will not tolerate the ISIS folks from gaining ground and becoming a state. That's the first thing he should say. Doesn't mean that we have to be the ones on the ground preventing it. It means that we have to take a leadership role, not lead from behind, but lead with the others in the region.
But what is that leadership role, though?
My recommendation, London Center's recommendation, is put together a NATO-type organization that we help the Saudis, the Turks, and the Egyptians, for goodness sake, and the Jordanians put together a unit which can go in there and help stabilize the region. It may end up that we all have to accept a partition. It's just that we should help establish that partition in terms which are favorable to us and our allies. To do nothing at this point, Ed, is going to see continued chaos, and frankly, you're going to see the American public suffer from higher oil prices, and there could be clearly additional terrorist attacks from ISIS once they are able to establish their own bases in Iraq and Syria.
Minute or so that I have left here, I want to go back one more time to one other part of what's happening here in this war theater right now. We're seeing videotape or recordings of Iraqi airstrikes against certain positions, purportedly against ISIS renegades. Knowing what we know now, should we put any faith in these airstrikes really doing any good?
The honest answer is, I don't know. I had proposed last week on another network that we start doing airstrikes to slow these guys down, to gain more time to think, to hit their centers of gravity. The question becomes, are these centers of gravity that are ISIS, or all these Maliki's enemies he wants to get rid of? These people, Ed, play very dirty politics. They make our politics look calm compared to theirs. They murder people. So this is where we just don't know, because we don't have access, and we don't have access because we failed to put people on the ground there earlier on to actually try to figure out what's going on. And I think putting the 300 on the ground there now, maybe $1 late and 3 months too short.
30 seconds. Isn't that one of the biggest problems? We here in America still don't understand the brutality and also a lot of the graft and the underpinnings that go on in that society politically.
I get so fed up, Ed, with the president saying that how gun violence makes our country less safe. Look, he's not seen gun violence until he's seen These thugs go in and kill whole villages. I mean, there's no comparison. So we've got to be clear here. We have to, again, establish what is in our interest, the American people, for that region. After we establish that, then create a strategy to go with that. Ed, we don't have either right now. And until then, we'll see chaos. We'll see prices of oil go up. And eventually we'll see another attack of 9/11 scale, likely against us by this group or others in that region if we don't pay attention to it now.
Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, always frank. It is always a pleasure to have you on, my friend. We'll speak again.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks for having me.
There you're hearing some real hard talk about what's going on. We will continue to do that as the day goes on, because right here on MidPoint every day, we question everything.